All right, the time is now 9:32. Thank you for your interest in the Rulemaking Advisory Committee relating to complex plumbing structure categorization. This committee is a hybrid meeting that is being held in person and via Zoom. My name is Ian Paik, and I'm an analyst with the division, and on the call is Andy Skinner, the division's plumbing chief. We will conduct this Rulemaking Advisory Committee meeting. The division is considering whether to expand the complex structure categorization to include installation of utility systems situated outside a building exterior of a particular job site. This division is also considering whether to amend complex structure criteria for water service lines from an interior diameter or nominal pipe size of 2 inches to 2.5 inches. A little background on this issue. The division is considering this rulemaking following requests from stakeholders and contractors to help provide a solution to a problem they are facing. This rulemaking was initiated to preempt future utility overload issues resulting from increased middle housing density and allow the code to adapt to modern plumbing systems. The division is considering a rulemaking to expand which systems qualify as complex plumbing structures categorized in OAR 918-780-0040. There are 4 issues to discuss at this Rulemaking Advisory Committee. The first 2 issues deal with the rule amendment language, and the second 2 issues deal with the potential economic and racial equity outcomes associated with this rulemaking. The division's goal is to receive guidance and input from the committee on each issue's possible impact on the plumbing industry, local government, and the public. The committee's role is to give input and guidance on this rulemaking before a final draft of the proposed rule language is presented to the State Plumbing Board. Ultimately, the State Plumbing Board will need to approve the draft rules and recommend the division proceed with rulemaking. We look forward to the committee's feedback. Beginning with issue 1, should utility systems situated outside a building exterior of a particular job site be considered complex plumbing structures under OAR 918-780-0040. Little pre-discussion before opening it up to the committee. This issue was brought before the division from stakeholders and contractors dealing with middle housing density issues. Middle housing presents a potential utility overload issue as residences are condensed into a smaller area, requiring a higher output from utility systems. If utility systems situated outside a building exterior of a particular job site are categorized as complex structures, it would allow cities to ensure adequate space, service, and connection throughout the plan review process. This categorization allows jurisdictions with middle housing standards the option to make utility plan review on properties satisfying middle housing standards mandatory. This has not been required by OAR 918-780-0040 before. Do we have any initial comments from the committee on this issue?
Yeah, hello, this is Brad, Syndicate, City of Hillsborough. It'd be interesting to see just how complex these are. The density, I mean, I can see the reasoning of wanting to at least have another set of eyes on there. But typically with site work, that's always been kind of up to the jurisdiction's discretion if they wanted to do a plan review or not. So I don't know. I guess I'm kind of neutral on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Does anyone on the committee foresee any possible economic or fiscal results from this, from adding these kind of structures to complex categorization?
Brad Syndicate, City of Hillsborough. Again, I don't know if it's too early on a Monday morning. We're all kind of quiet. And it is going to increase. We got the 25% fee, for the plan review that would be charged. It's going to increase it a bit depending on the size of the project. Whether that's overwhelming or not, that's kind of up to them. That's it. Thank you.
Hello there, this is Segundo Sam. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so if we still have the ability to once we see the plans, if it is kind of a simple in nature, we can always skip the plan review, right? So I would prefer, I would actually like to see plan reviews on those, basically because in the past, I have encountered a lot of systems that I didn't know anything about. And once I get to the site, I realized that they don't meet the code, and then they have to present a lot of information, alternative engineer design and stuff like that. So personally, I would like to see the BCD put the these kind of systems under complex ones.
Thank you.
Apologies, we do need to pause for just a moment. Our online stream is still muted.
We'll be paused for just a moment while we fix the stream audio. Sorry for the delay, everyone. Thank you for your patience. However, maybe that gave us an opportunity. If anyone in the committee has any more thoughts on issue 1 before we close it and move on to issue 2. Are there any thoughts from the committee on issue 1 regarding utility systems situated outside a building exterior of a particular job site and whether they should be considered complex plumbing structures under OAR 918-780-0040? Okay, the committee will move on to issue 2. Should the division amend complex structure categorization for water service lines, increasing the interior diameter or nominal pipe size of 2 inches to 2.5 inches? A little background on this issue before discussion. This issue was brought before the division from stakeholders and contractors working with modern plumbing systems that involve low flow fixtures and focus on sustainability. Water service lines with a 2-inch diameter or larger are currently categorized as complex structures necessitating a plan review. Amending the complex structure categorization for water service lines by increasing the interior diameter would allow smaller building contractors utilizing smaller water service lines to avoid plan review. Does the committee have any thoughts on this issue, number 2?
Again, Brad Sinecat, City of Hillsborough. With the smaller and the lower flow fixture units, that's actually decreasing the water service required size, so probably behind or be less than 2-inch, which they wouldn't need to have it engineered. So I think increasing it to 2.5 is going to mean they can put a much larger building on there without having to have a plan review. So I'd like to keep the current language. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else in the committee? Oh, yes, Jonathan.
I agree with Brad in the context of, I think the justification seems backwards in reality, that it should be going less, but I actually support the intent of the taking it out of complex structure, because we end up seeing a fair amount of townhouses and even apartment buildings that we can't look at because of an SPI, when in reality the actual dwelling unit itself didn't need a 2-inch service. They're just choosing to run a 2-inch main or something like that because they're serving multiple buildings, and there really wasn't a need for plan review. It's just because they do have the increased demand, which we should be able to take care of in the field. So I actually support this measure, and like I had mentioned in the past, equal change in the SPI stuff, so we can look at those non-complex structure stuff.
Thank you.
Brad, City Hillsborough. Yeah, and I understand what Jonathan's saying. It would be nice to open this up, but I think if they're voluntarily running a 2-inch line that they don't need, the way it's wording now, if it's requiring a building service line with an interior of 2-inch, well, if it only required 1.25 inches, then the SPI should still be able to do the work with the current language. Thanks.
Thank you.
And I guess rebuttal-wise to Brad's thought, I don't know until I'm out there and do a plan review if it required it or I didn't require it. It's, you know, kind of a chicken and the egg thing, and I'm not going to get out there, have a customer think that I'm going to be able to take care of their inspection just to look at it and say, oh, sorry, that has to be my A level.
Thank you. Does anyone else in the committee have any thoughts on this? Or Andy, do you want to respond to any of their concerns?
Yeah, I don't have any specific response. I just kind of want to, reiterate that the change here is to kind of broaden those projects that are really not complex. The larger low rise, the larger apartment complex systems, to take them out of that plan review, and also, as kind of stated earlier, to try to align the scoping with the SPI as well. So, I understand that the low flow fixtures actually reduces the service size, but by making the service larger in the complex structure, that's going to bring in a lot more larger apartment complex projects under the non-complex pathway. And so we're just broadening that instead of making these smaller apartment complexes or medium-sized apartment complexes complex structures. So again, that's kind of all I want to do, is just kind of give a broad overview there. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Before we move on to issue 3, does anyone in the committee have any final words on issue 2? Again, we can revisit any issue at the end of the meeting, so this will not be your final bite at the apple. Okay, moving on to issue 3. What are the potential fiscal and economic impacts of this rulemaking? We touched on it a little bit earlier, but with a little more focus. With any rulemaking, the division is required to make particular note of the potential fiscal and economic impact that might result from the new rules. The division is requesting input from the committee on the nature and extent of any fiscal or economic impact that may be caused by this rule. Some examples of potential fiscal or economic impact would be additional costs or requirements on local municipalities, additional costs or requirements on particular types of businesses, whether the new rule will require additional training to implement, comply with, or enforce, whether the new rule will make particular actions or products more or less expensive. This is just a list of some examples. It is not exhaustive, but if the committee has any thoughts on this issue, please let us know. Yes, Jonathan.
I think it's sadly kind of a mixed one depending on each one. So the removing the complex system from a 2-inch water service to 2.5 will actually decrease potential revenue for a jurisdiction, so there's a cost that way, but it will balance out by allowing SPIs and others to do those types of inspections. So somewhat balancing it out by not having to invest the staff time in the plan review and being able to use different inspectors. So it's, each jurisdiction is going to be different. So I won't say it's a wash, but it seems to somewhat balance itself out there. There's obviously a cost savings and time savings for our customers, which is a good thing in that aspect. The complex on-site one, as long as again it stays as an optional thing the jurisdiction can do. Not every case they're going to have a plan review. We get to decide a little bit. The reality of it is, where a plan review is required, it's going to cost the customers additional time, and it will end up costing jurisdictions a little bit more time allocation for their A levels to do those plan reviews.
Thank you. Do any of the other committee members have thoughts on the potential fiscal or economic impacts of either rulemaking?
Brad Syndicate, City of Hillsborough. I would have to agree with Jonathan. I think it's going to be a balance in cost. Not having to pay the plan review fees, or allowing the SPIs to do it. So again, I think it'd be kind of a balance. I'm having a hard time. We don't use SPIs in our area, so I'm just trying to look at it, through some different lenses here for the rest of the state. And definitely want to make it easier for people, more economical in support of the middle housing type of a project. So thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on to issue 4, are there any final thoughts on issue 3, the potential fiscal or economic impacts of this rulemaking? Okay, moving on to issue 4, what are the potential impacts on racial equity in the state? With any rulemaking, the division is required to make particular note of any potential impact on racial equity in the state that might result from the new rules. The division would welcome any input from the committee on the nature and extent of any impact this rule may have on racial equity in Oregon. Do members of the committee have thoughts on the possible racial equity impact of this new rule? Either issue 1 or 2. Thank you. Or possibly, does the committee have any thoughts on whether the requirements or the possible costs may have racial equity impacts resulting from this rulemaking, or if it's not applicable? Yes, Jonathan.
I think it's not necessarily going to be applicable. There is likely a small impact to MBIs if there's a increased cost in plan review for the additional complex systems for site improvements and stuff like that. If previous RAC meeting, it is potentially flag lots and stuff like that too, not being used for apartment complexes and stuff like that. So there could be some minor impact to MBIs.
Thank you. Does the committee have any additional thoughts on racial equity resulting from this rulemaking, or any of the other issues we've discussed? whether the actual rule amendment language in issues 1 or 2, or any potential fiscal or economic impact thoughts as well. Andy, do you have any questions or concerns you would like addressed by the committee?
No, I do not.
Does the committee have any issues relating to what we've discussed today that they would like to talk about or revisit? Hearing none, I will adjourn the Rulemaking Advisory Committee at 10 a.m. Again, thank you for your patience with a little bit of a technical difficulty in the middle. You can inform the division with any other thoughts you may have until Friday, 5 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.